So for those of you waiting for the big boys, the iMac Pro and the Mac Pro with Apple Silicon, Gurman does give us new tidbits, and so let's delve into it. So let's actually begin with the Mac Pro. So Gurman tells us there was an M1 version of the Mac Pro in the works, but that was scrapped in favour of the M2 version. Now I'm not sure why this was the case. Maybe they weren't happy with the performance gains, and so instead they're waiting for the 3nm process to implement on the M2 Extreme chip. But this does confirm the idea that the Mac Studio was a stopgap device for those urgently in need for a Mac Pro-like device, and so I'm pretty sure if the M1 variant of the Mac Pro did release, we might not have a Mac Studio in the lineup. In fact, I do remember Gurman even telling us an M1 Max version of the Mac Mini was in the works, and so clearly Apple was initially planning to give us different variants of the Mac Mini and then of course the Mac Pro alongside it with the biggest, baddest M2 chip. But to be honest, I'm glad they gave us the Mac Studio because the Mac Pro is overkill for some consumers, and so giving them a taste of that experience for a lower price is pretty great. Anyways, for those wondering about the release of the Mac Studio, Gurman then tells us we should see a release by the end of this year. Now this apparently will just be announced on stage, but then will be available to buy between spring and summer of 2023. So of course, much like Apple has done in the past, this should be a staggered release. And I guess this could make sense, but personally I do think Apple's better off delaying the announcement of the Mac Pro for dub, since I do feel end of this year could be too early and of course could cannibalize the Mac Studio in the range. And so yes, ideally Apple should wait till the Mac Studio has been out for a year and then of course announce their plans for a Mac Pro. And yeah, let's actually move on to the chip because Gurman tells us he believes Extreme is going to be the name for this chip, and I do still disagree with this because Extreme sounds kinda ridiculous. Then again, Max and Ultra also does, but Apple still went ahead with it. Though personally I'm still hoping that Apple's calling this the X1 or the Z1 chip, since A, that sounds better, but B, this should be differentiated from the regular M series, since this is going to be a truly professional chip, whereas the others are consumer/prosumer chips. But anyways, the M2 Extreme chip is essentially going to be two M2 Ultras, and that should be based on a 3nm process, and should give us more GPU cores and more CPU cores, ultimately improving the performance quite massively. In fact, if you want the raw numbers, we should see a 20-core CPU in this, alongside 192 GPU cores, and also a whopping 384 gigs of RAM, so this is gonna be a beast. Anyways, let's now move on to the iMac Pro because there's been tons of back and forth on whether we're gonna see this, but Gurman does tell us that yes, this is currently in development and could see a 2022 or 2023 release. Now Gurman, I believe in the past, has told us this iMac Pro is going to skip out on the M2 series and is directly going to get the M3 series of chips, and we should see the M3 Pro and the M3 Max in this, and also maybe the M3 Ultra. And do remember that if the M2 Max does not get the 3nm process, the M3 should get it, and so yeah, these iMacs could see huge performance upgrades. And design-wise, this should be very similar to the 24-inch iMac, but of course with black bezels, maybe no chin, and also space gray option. Actually, midnight for the iMac Pro would also look pretty dope. CS Apple, please make that happen. Anyways, let's delve into your comments regarding these future Macs. Now Isaac, I believe, apologies if I'm butchering your name, but they say the Mac Pro should release at the October event, since Apple ideally is going to stick to the 2-year transition that of course they did announce in 2020, and they also believe that yes, this chip should be called the X1 or the Z1. And I'm glad you agree with that, and regarding the release, yes, that is a fair point. Apple does want to stick to the 2-year cycle, but of course, do remember that with the chip shortage, I don't think Apple's going to stick to that plan strictly as such, since let's say the iPhone needs the chip resources first, Apple's easily going to do that and delay the Mac Pro release because it's a low volume product. And yeah, I guess they could announce it and then release it months later like they've done in the past, but ultimately I do still think the Mac Pro's not going to release just yet, and we might have to wait till WWDC. Anyways, they also ask whether the Mac Pro could get 4 M2 Ultra chips instead of 4 M2 Max chips. Now that could give us ludicrous performance, and yeah, there is a possibility Apple could do this, but once again it depends on the chip shortage. I'm sure producing such a high-end chip is not gonna be easy, so of course, Apple might have to limit themselves and give us a chip based on 2 M2 Ultras instead of 4 chips. But once we do see chip production go back to normal, then yes, maybe I could see Apple do this. So Tom and Tech hopes M2 Pro, Max and Ultra are 3nm since M2 was a lackluster refresh, and they want bigger upgrades. And yes, I'm also hoping for the same because, for the most part, the M2 Pro / Max, that's a mouthful, but anyways, these Macs are gonna be pretty boring because the Mac Mini and the MacBook Pro are not getting new designs, and so the chip upgrades have to be the main USP. So of course, to make up for the lack of upgrades, I'm hoping Apple does give us chips based on the 3nm process. So Opus Digital Audio says, I want an M2 Tornado chip, and yeah, I know they're joking, but I do honestly think there is a small chance Apple does go with that, especially with how ridiculous Apple's naming scheme is becoming with their chips. So Jan says, I want a normal 27-inch or bigger 32-inch iMac. They were a great option for years for an affordable workhorse, and they complain about the Mac Studio setup being pretty expensive, and so they want Apple to give us a successor to the 27-inch iMac. And I do think we're getting that with the iMac Pro, because while the name might be iMac Pro, this is not going to be a replacement to the original iMac Pro, but instead is going to replace the 27-inch iMac, and so the price of this should be somewhere around the 14-inch base MacBook Pro, and I purely think Apple's using the Pro branding to, of course, differentiate this from the base iMac that, of course, is for regular consumers. So yes, hopefully Gurman is right, and we do see a bigger version of the iMac launch relatively soon. Anyways, that's about it, guys, but of course tell me your thoughts regarding this report in the comments. Anyways, thank you for watching, guys. Make sure to like and subscribe for the latest Apple news and rumours. Check out the video above on details regarding the M2 iPads, and on that note, see ya peeps.